Morgan.
I'm Zach.
And this is our channel, Life After Leaping. Welcome back if you have been here before and you saw our first video. If you haven't, we introduced ourselves in the last video where we talked about how we started over and made a big move abroad. So in this video, we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that we gave up to make this move. Anybody that's moved anywhere, really, you know what it's like to have to let certain things go, say goodbye to things. So we came up with a list of about 7 things that we felt like were challenging to say goodbye to. So let's get into it. The first thing on the list would be our animals. As I've mentioned before, we ran a small farm and we had a lot of animals that we had accumulated over the last few years. I'm not even an overly sentimental person, but I definitely got attached to a lot of my animals. We had sheep, goats, chickens, geese, and dogs. So that was really hard and we had to find homes for all of our animals. I don't think you were overly attached to...
I didn't really have a hard time saying goodbye to the animals.
Yeah, it wasn't really,
no.
But me and the kids definitely had a hard time. Like one of my goats was one of my bottle babies. I had her since she was really small. I bottle fed her and raised her, and then I bred her, and then she had 2 little boys that I also helped raised for a little while, and then they all went to the same home together. Some of our farm was for investment purposes. We had bought sheep. If you are familiar with Valais black-nosed sheep, they are considered to be the cutest sheep in the world. They are like giant dogs and very friendly. So we had some of those on our farm. And our kids loved the animals, especially my daughter. She's super into animals. So we actually did have a lamb born on our farm before we had made this decision to move. And yeah, so our animals that was a really tough one to let go of. I would say number 2 on the list is probably your truck.
Yeah, the truck was more of a thing to sacrifice. It was one of the things that we kind of had to make the decision before we knew if we would actually be able to get here.
Yeah.
It had kind of been a dream truck for me. It was brand new. We used it for the animals, but we also made a lot of memories in it. I mean, we'd go on trips to the beach with the kids. When we were building our house, we actually had to sleep in the truck a couple of times before the RV was up or had power because it was so cold.
Oh yeah, that was fun.
But yeah, that was one of those things that we had to make the decision to let it go because it was a lease, but we were originally planning on moving into purchasing it.
We were coming up on that window where we had to decide, are we going to buy it, basically move from a lease to financing what was left? Because we knew that if we decided to buy it, we were going to be stuck with a pretty hefty car payment that we wouldn't be able to get out from under in time if we did end up leaving. Because like you were saying, we didn't know at the time for sure if we were going to make the move, it was going to work out. We hadn't had visa approvals yet, which that's a whole nother video. We'll talk about the application process for applying for visas. But yeah, so the truck was really tough. In fact, I remember the day that we went and dropped it off at the dealership and we were like, okay, we're not going to extend our lease. Like, that's it, we're turning it in. And it was actually kind of emotional because it felt like it's been a part of the family and we had all those really nice memories in it and we'd done so many things in that truck and you'd wanted one for so long. And I remember all the hunting we did trying to find it, and finding that perfect truck, you were like super excited about it. So that was a little bit tough, letting go of the truck.
The kids were a little sad about it.
The kids were sad about it too. We did had one other vehicle, but they didn't care about that one. When we sold that one, I think we took it to like CarMax and just dropped it off, and nobody really cared about that. It was an older car, it was paid off, and there was really no sentimental attachment, but we all really loved that truck. So number 3 would be our kids' school, which is kind of sentimental in a lot of ways because anybody that has their kids in school knows that once you get comfortable, you know the teachers, you know the campus, like you know where all the playgrounds are, you know where all the classes are. And there's a comfort with that when you have to drop your kids off somewhere and leave them there for hours at a time. That was actually kind of tough. The kids like their school and they like their teachers. Granted, they're early elementary, so it's not very traumatic for them to make these kinds of changes, but they were happy there. And I had grown comfortable with the school, and so I think that was a bit tough to kind of pull, take them out of school and say, okay, like we're officially no longer going to be taking them to this school anymore. So I think that was a little bit difficult for me. And then of course their last day, the teachers are crying and they're going to miss the kids and they're wanting to get updates and all their little friends coming out to say goodbye. And so that was kind of emotional. And actually it was unexpected. I didn't really think that I was going to be affected very much by that. And I didn't think that any of the people there, like the teachers and other kids, like I didn't think that it would be a big deal, but it was definitely bigger than I thought it was going to be.
Noticing a little trend with the things being a little more emotional than you expected.
Yeah.
I think for me, the school was comfort. When we were getting ready to move here, it's like, are we going to put them in public school? With the English not being the primary language, are we going to homeschool, which is ultimately what we decided. I'm sure that will be more in on that later.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that in our video.
The responsibility too is being taken on, when you're homeschooling as the parents, and there's a lot more patience that has to be learned. So for me, the school was missed because though you're in it a little bit, helping the kids with the reading and the schoolwork at home and going into the teachers, there's a lot more that's on us now than there was prior.
Yeah. So that's an adjustment too, because it really changes your routine.
Yeah.
The kids' school, that would be the third thing. So number 4, I would say personal belongings, like just certain things that make home that we couldn't and didn't bring with us because we were limited in what we could pack, and everything has a weight limit. And then of course, just electrical outlets are different here. And I remember reading things that were like, don't bother bringing your blow dryer or your blender or, things like that we would use back home that were like, oh, okay, that's not coming with us. I would say my blender, that's a big one because I like to make smoothies and I like to cook, and that's something I used a lot. Probably your coffee maker, I don't know if you missed that as much as you thought you would, but that's something that was like a part of our regular life. I know what you missed, your robe.
I did miss my robe.
That thing, like, he wore it all the time. It didn't matter if it was cold or hot. He always loved wearing that robe. We called it his Jedi robe. It's huge and blue and a big hood, and he would wear it over his head. And that thing was so like thick and fluffy that there was no way it was getting packed.
Well, it's comfort, right? Like that's when we're talking about possessions that we had to give up, that we missed. Not everybody, when they're moving internationally, give up everything. A lot of people will bring a lot with them, but for financial reasons and for simplifying, we wanted to adjust and get what we needed when we were here, not knowing what circumstances we'd end up finding ourselves in. So I missed my bed. The bed we have now is not bad at all by any means, but we had a nice California king. I missed my computer chair because I was in that a lot for either working or gaming or just being on the computer in general. Like she said, I missed my robe. Comfort, small comforts, and then things of convenience. We didn't have a lot of stuff because we had downsized when we moved states. But I had a big toolbox and I had a bunch of tools that I need. Now here we are. We don't know the brands. They have a lot of different brands. You need something, you got to figure out what store it's in, where it's at. So again, it's kind of that comfort of the stuff.
Comfort and convenience.
Missed a little bit.
Yeah, so some of those things we noticed were a little bit of a challenge to let go of, and just making decisions as you're sorting through things like, is this going, is this staying? And we went through that process several times while we were packing, because again, you don't know how much space you're going to have. And as you're selling everything, I don't know if that's even a separate number, but like our furniture, like you talked about our beds and stuff like that. We knew we weren't bringing furniture, but the smaller things that we thought, oh, maybe we can bring this with us. And then there ended up being no room. So we had packed everything up at one point, and then we moved out of our house and we went back through our stuff and we had to repack again.
Yeah.
Because we had to pull more things out. We're weighing everything and it's like, oh, it's over. Or we only have this many totes, this many suitcases to bring with us.
Yeah, because the bringing the luggage on the plane starts getting quite expensive per bag or tote.
Right. And I think we ended up spending to bring what we had with us, which I think we had 11 items.
Checked items.
Checked items with us, including our dog, which she is like a baby bear. She's 125 pounds. So we brought her with us. In her huge crate. So that was one big checked item. And then we had a few pieces of luggage and a few totes. I think we had 11 items and we spent about $1,600 to get everything here. And that was with leaving some things behind. We left a few totes behind. So 5, I would say your job.
Yeah.
Because that was probably, I don't even think probably, but that was one of the scariest things I feel like for us to let go of, because it wasn't something you could bring with you. And there was definitely comfort in the stability that came from your job.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of apprehension with giving up the job. It had great benefits. It was a government job. It's good pay, good schedule.
Yeah.
I was working like 4 10s, 2 days from home. So
Yeah.
it was a very ideal schedule. And
even though the commute was hard, I mean, that was one of the things you weren't sad to let go of.
No.
Was the long drive, because you were driving like an hour each way.
Yeah.
And leaving super early in the morning, getting back later in the evening. And
and of course, traffic. So sometimes it would take me, if there was an accident, it could take over 2 hours to get home sometimes. So I definitely don't miss that.
And sometimes you did have to go in. You weren't, you would have your at-home days, but sometimes you were going in and you weren't working from home.
Yeah.
So everybody tries to hold on to whatever stability they can muster. And so when you're letting go of that for something that's completely unknown, it's just intimidating in general. And then as a parent, you're thinking, okay, so I'm giving up something that is providing for our family, and we're just going to let that go for what we think is going to be.
I mean, it's different, right? Because the other things we talked about, giving up possessions or even the kids' school, those are all things we could easily get back,
Yeah.
Especially if the job is still there.
Right.
And again, we gave up that job without knowing if the move would be permanent or even how long, if it would be a few months or if it would be a few years. So there was a lot of apprehension with giving up the job for sure.
Yeah. And I'm grateful though, because they were really supportive, your reasons for doing that. And when you explained to them like why we were making this change in this move, and they were like, hey, we would take you back. Like if you came back, we would.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's hard to understand, right? Letting go of a job like that, as far as security and what is conceptually accepted and normal,
right?
Of something that you would pursue or hold on to. So I remember my supervisor was like supportive, but you could see like there was a little bit of like disbelief, like, wow, you're really gonna give this up, and with nothing, concrete to take care of things
to replace
forward.
It, right?
So
it wasn't really a replaceable situation.
Yeah, that was a hurdle in multiple ways for sure.
Yeah,
it was a big one.
Okay, so number 6, I would say, is people. I mean, let's explain this for a moment. So we've moved many times and we've adjusted. We're pretty adaptable in that way. We haven't always lived around our families or our friends, and a lot of my closest friends are spread out all over North America. I don't know that I've ever lived near all my closest friends. And I've lived away from like my family for most of my life. We weren't always in the same state. So, and then we moved states and we were away from your family. That was the first time that you had lived away from everything you grew up around. So we had already done it in a big way. And so I feel like technically people should be on the list because obviously, we love all of our friends and our family. But at the same time, it was like, we've done this, we know we can do it. And anybody that you're close to,
you can still
you're
contact,
still going to be in
call.
touch with, you know, yeah, they're still going to be a part of your life no matter where you live. So I feel like that's on the list, but it didn't have the same impact that I think it would for many people if they've always been in the same area or around people that they've known their whole lives. But having already made big moves before, I feel like we were kind of already prepared for that.
Yeah. COVID, the isolation.
Yeah.
Kind of was one thing that kind of helped us adjust. And then we always traveled, pretty much just you and I, and then we had our son. When we moved states, I was always in California.
Yeah, you were kind of traveling back and forth for work too. So.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like moving away from there and just kind of starting over. It was nerve-wracking at first, but it was like, you realize kind of what we're saying is like, you can stay in contact with your friends, your family. It's not really that hard, you know? Yeah. And it was like, oh, I don't need to go over there all the time or see them all the time. I'm comfortable with my family here in the new state. And then, I don't know, I think now I see it a little bit more where it's like, oh, I want to call someone or, and you know, you got to think about the time difference.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Like, I want to game with a friend and it's like, you know, it's 10 o'clock at night here, but it's a whole different time there and it might be still working. So, you know, there's definitely some sacrifice there with people.
And I think the last thing, number 7, would be accounts, which is kind of a strange one, but you know, we had the same like bank accounts for years. Like I had all those numbers memorized. And when we were planning to move, we had to think about, okay, what accounts are going to be more like internationally friendly. And that was kind of a challenge as well, because there was a lot of research involved and then trying to figure out, okay, what accounts are going to give us access to ATMs? You know, what banks are going to work better over there? Which ones are going to be more cost effective?
International fees.
Yeah, and then just
wire transfer fees.
So yeah, so many things like that you have to think about. So we kind of simplified our banking. So I think those are the 7 things. And if you've ever been through this process or you've thought about it, we'd be curious to know what things you feel like would be difficult for you to say goodbye to. Or things you've experienced saying goodbye to and having to go through this process. We'd love to see in the comments below. And yeah, I think that's everything. So thanks for watching and we'll see you in the next video.
Bye for now.